Just because something used to be true doesn't mean that it still is. And that's especially true for retirement planning. So in this video, we're going to talk about how a lot of these things that are changing, interest rates, tax uncertainty, longer retirements, there's so many different factors that are going to make you rethink some of that old advice. We'll give you 7 assumptions today about retirement that you should reconsider in 2025. Welcome in. This is Perfect Game Retirement. Glad to have you here. Please subscribe if you haven't already. He's Ryan Ledden at Black Oak Asset Management. And we got some assumptions to dive into today, Ryan. I want to just kind of get into them because there's some good stuff here to talk about. And again, there's so much that's changed. Just kind of maybe little piggybacks off our last video for Gen Xers that are going into retirement. Maybe they have some assumptions. These are going to hopefully clear up some of the things that maybe you think are true about retirement, but actually is not. So a Roth IRA, we talk all the time about Roths, very good product. Hopefully you're putting some money into a Roth. Maybe it makes sense to put more or less. That's what your advisor's for to help you figure out. But the assumption is that a Roth IRA is actually going to save you money in the end. Obviously that depends, Ryan, but what's the truth behind it? How can a Roth help you? And what are some times that maybe it won't save you money in the end?
Age has a lot to do with it. And then also how much of your money is already allocated in pre-tax accounts. Again, we've talked a lot on this show about Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks. I love them. It doesn't guarantee it's going to save you money in retirement. Maybe you're in a very high tax bracket and toward the very end, right before retirement, and it just makes sense for you to put money in the traditional side, and maybe it's tax savings now, and then you won't really get that full cost benefit of putting money into a Roth 401k when you're, depending on what state you live in, you may be paying 50% in taxes because of federal, and then you got state as well. So, it could make sense to do a traditional. That would be hard for me to justify, especially if we did planning for someone and they're, paying 40 to 50% in full taxes. And then when they get to retirement, they're in the 12 or 22% tax bracket. Well, that would be irresponsible on my part to say, oh, you got to do Roth. You got to do Roth. Everybody's got to do Roth. That's not necessarily the case. But again, the younger you are, I can definitely still justify it in that case where you're in a higher tax bracket because you have this long runway of tax-free growth. Again, the biggest giant variable is what are tax rates going to be in 15 years from now, 20 years from now, 25 years from now. We don't know that. That's the biggest question. And for me, if they go up, you benefited from doing a Roth. If they stay the same, you still probably benefited from doing a Roth. If they're the other way around and they're lower, then okay, you probably should have done a traditional. So in my example there, when you're in a very high tax rate and you retire and your income puts you in the 12 or 22%, then it does make sense to do a traditional IRA.
Again, one of those things you need to talk about with your advisor, and Ryan, the team can help you with that. Social Security is our next myth here. So delaying it, many people believe, is going to yield you the most income over the long haul. And while your benefit does increase, Ryan, it can backfire, right, to actually wait as long as possible.
It can. And yeah, we don't, if all of us knew our death day, which would be really weird, but if we knew when we were going to die, we could calculate this out very, very easily and know what the break even is going to be. So yeah, just by delaying doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the best benefit out of it, because what if something happens to us and we pass away? So usually that break even, and depends on what ages you're comparing, is somewhere between 78 and 81 is kind of that break even, depending on when you claim it versus claiming it at 62. So if you claim it at 62 versus 67, the break even's around 78 and some change as far as age goes. So if you took it at 62 and you live past 78, well, you didn't really benefit from taking it early. If you took it at 67 and live beyond those ages, then okay, you did benefit from that. And then 70 is the age where it's like 81-ish is when, if you live past 81 and you waited till 70, you benefited from doing that. So it's an educated guess, but there's also a legacy play. If have a married spouse who maybe their benefit was extremely low and you want to leave a legacy with them, you keep the higher of the two benefits. So that's where probably delaying it is going to help out. But if you're just a single person, it's just you and you just want to take it, then that may be the age to take it at. But just delaying doesn't always mean it's going to benefit you.
All right, that's a good one. That's a big decision too. Social Security is going to be, probably a big chunk of your income, more so than others. But you want to make sure you get that right. So again, speakwithRyan.com is the best place to start to have that conversation with Black Oak Asset Management and begin talking about some of the concerns, questions you might have about retirement, Social Security being a big part of that for many people. As you get closer to retirement, I know you start thinking about being a little more conservative in terms of your investments. And the big myth here that we want to talk about for retirement is that putting your money in bonds is going to be safer than putting your money into stocks. It's going to create a safer portfolio for you, Ryan. I know this is the traditional thinking, but I think we've seen in recent years that's not always the case.
Yeah, 2022. There's always an inverse relationship between interest rates and bond prices, always. So when interest rates climb like they did in 2022, bond prices go down. So we saw 2022, the stock market was down, the bond market was down. It got crushed, absolutely crushed. There's a seesaw relationship there with interest rates. Right now, interest rates have kind of just held steady. They'll fluctuate here and there, but nothing significant as far as a drop goes. If they do start dropping significantly, then bond prices will go up. So if we know interest rates are going to go down, we want to go long as far as bond durations go. So we want to go as long as possible. So I don't have a crystal ball, but I just think interest rates are going to kind of hold steady. This is sort of the new norm, just like we got used to 2 to 3% interest rates. This is just kind of the new norm. So again, that's my humble opinion, not a prognostication by any stretch, but that's just what I think it's going to be. So, but bonds, they do have interest rate risk. They don't have stock market risk, but they do have interest rate risk, and so that's a real thing. So some people just assume bonds are safe and they don't lose money. They 100% can lose money. They're just not directly correlated to the stock market. So if you look at your portfolio as a whole, bonds usually lower the risk of a portfolio when it's all together in one, but they do have their own inherent risk.
All right, next assumption here that we want to make sure you rethink is taking a lump sum is going to be your best approach. And if you are fortunate enough to where your employer is giving you a pension and then gives you the option to choose between the lump sum and the monthly pension, it's important you got to evaluate those options pretty carefully, don't you?
Oh yeah, a lot goes into this, and usually the payout is pretty evident. It's like, oh no, stick with the pension, or no, take the lump sum. We can create a much larger income than what they're telling you they can produce. Obviously, you need to check the solvency rate of that pension. We need to know how financially their standing is as far as being able to pay those pension payouts forever. But I'll say most of my clients that we work with, lump sums are generally the better way to go because it's yours, it's your asset to keep. And maybe you have other income sources that you don't need that. But I do recently started working with a client, husband and wife, and the pension payout was awesome. I was like, man, I would love to manage that lump sum that they're giving you. But you know what? It's irresponsible for me to tell you to take the lump sum because the lump sum cannot produce that income that your pension is producing. So just again, check on the financial standing of the pension and make sure it's well funded. And if it's well funded, you got to take the pension. So it really does depend. It's usually very glaring. Oh yeah, take the lump sum, or oh yeah, take the pension.
Have a conversation about that before you make any decision on which path to take. Our fifth assumption here to reconsider is that you're going to spend less money in retirement. I think a lot of people just assume that to be the case. Obviously, you have fewer expenses in many cases, but does that always happen?
No. I've seen it where it stays pretty much the same. Now, there are extreme cases where they're high income earners, and yeah, they're not going to keep that level of income need. They can still have a very, very nice income, but maybe not at that level. But for the most part, it's about the same. So you see these articles that say, oh, you can live on 70% or 60%. I've seen that as false, especially in the early years, because you're not having expenses on lunches and gas and all that stuff, but you're doing other things. You're going to lunch, you're going to dinner, you're traveling, you're playing golf, you're doing other things that cost money. And it's every time you leave the house, it's $100. I swear, like you can't go anywhere and not spend that
Yeah.
kind of money every single time. So we plan on keeping the income the same, at least in the first few years. Then usually there is some dialing back. You don't travel as much. You don't do as extreme things. You're just more comfortable being at home. That's a real thing. So usually spending does taper off after that. And then you obviously have, what does healthcare look like? So that's the big what if that may increase expenses later. But we usually do income plans of pretty much keeping the income the same in retirement, at least in the beginning.
All right, we kind of got into this a little bit when we talked Social Security earlier, but the next assumption is your tax rate is going to be lower in retirement. Kind of the same ideas, right? You're not going to be making as much money. You don't have your income coming in from your steady job that you had the paycheck for. So your income is going to be less. Tax rate should be lower as well. But I know this depends person to person.
It does. I've run financial plans where people are in higher tax brackets. It can happen, especially if their savings are really tilted toward pre-tax savings their whole life. Then they have to pay tax on when they take that money out, which again affects Social Security and then your Medicare premium. So I've seen it where people are in a higher tax bracket, and usually you throw in a pension in there too, because if you have a pension, it's automatically going to move you up to a certain tax bracket. There's only so much tax planning you can do if you have a pension. Again, great problem to have if you're one of those individuals who have a pension. And we work with a lot of state employees in the state of Georgia. So whether they're educators or administrators or principals or whoever, we work with a lot of TRS employees. And so it's going to put you in a certain tax bracket again, which is great. But then if you have pre-tax savings stacked on top of that, maybe you're a federal employee, and we work with a bunch of federal employees and they have a large TSP and they've only been doing pre-tax in the TSP. Well, boom, every dollar they take out is just going to stack on top of their pension as well. So there could be a chance that you're in a lower tax bracket, definitely not blanket. Some people are in higher, if not the same. What I've seen is most people are about in the same, especially if you're kind of in that 22 or 24% tax bracket. It's pretty general. You're going to be in about the same bracket in retirement.
All right, let's close out with one last one, Ryan. And that's the assumption that you can work longer if you need to. I think a lot of people feel, hey, if things don't work out exactly how I want to in terms of my plan, I can always go back to work if needed. But we don't always have that control, do we?
No. And I'll mention my father as one. I mean, he has a pension, he has Social Security and his investments, and he always said, "Oh, I'll go back to work. I'll do something." He always mentions Home Depot because he's a super handy guy. So he's like, "Oh, I'll work at Home Depot." But you get in retirement, you don't work for 4 or 5 years. The last thing you want to do is be on a schedule, especially when you got grandkids pulling you in 10,000 different directions. So usually the want to go back to work is not there. Sometimes people have to. I had a conversation with another one of my clients 2 days ago. They were offered part-time work 2 days a week. And they were like, "Do I need to do this?" And I'm like, "No, you don't need to. You're fine. Only if you want to." And they're like, "Yeah, no, I'm good." They just wanted to make sure they didn't pass up that opportunity if they needed to go back to work. So but then health is always the issue too. You may not be able to go back to work, or ageism is a real thing. There's going to be some employers, and they'll tell you why, but they're like, "Yeah, we're not going to hire this person. They're a good bit older." Whether they actually say that or not is one thing, but that's a real thing. I've seen it with some of my clients that they're at a certain age and they get turned down by someone who is way less qualified, but way, way younger and probably command a much lower price tag. So you could always work, but that's not a guarantee.
Well, hopefully these help you, give you some things to think about, at least to reevaluate possibly if you haven't thought through them a little bit more. But these are some traditional beliefs that just aren't always true for retirees today. And some of the worst mistakes you can make in retirement planning don't come from intentional mistakes, right? They come from just bad assumptions. And this is why we want to bring these out to you. So again, a couple things that you can do right now. Go to speakwithryan.com to schedule a time to sit down with Ryan, talk about some concerns, make sure you are on the right track in these areas. But you can also go to retireperfect.com and get a copy of Ryan's book to diffuse the retirement threats. Again, you'll see, you put your name, email, some contact info to get in touch with these and get the book out to you. But it's a great help. It's a great starting point to kind of look through some of these challenges in retirement that maybe you assumed would not be a problem for you. But either way, we appreciate you watching this episode of Perfect Game Retirement. Please subscribe, leave a comment as well if you have any questions for Ryan. We'll talk to you again soon.